We wanted today's session to build on our first digital transformation event, which was back in August last year. And our aim in today's event is to help establish more momentum and collaborative effort for our shared digital journey. I'm sure that we're all well aware that digital transformation is not all about the technology. We need to focus in on the problems and challenges that we're trying to solve. And the events of the past 12 months have really shown that significant change can be achieved in really short timescales. New and innovative technologies offer huge potential for us, and there are really exciting opportunities for digital transformation within the environment sector. Really focusing on encouraging innovation, sharing learning, and scaling up our efforts to reverse the loss of biodiversity in Scotland. So I'm sure, I think we'd all agree that collaboration and networking with partners will be absolutely critical if we're to maximise the benefits from digital technologies to help us tackle these pressing issues and to support us on our journey to a nature-rich net zero future. The themes at the August event seem as relevant now as they did 8 months ago. As a reminder, we focused on improved scientific understanding, streamlined internal operations, and more targeted public engagement. And these themes are now embedded in our statement of ambition, which was developed following that August event. I'm sure they will also run through today's conversations. There has been a lot happening over the past month or so. We've seen the publication of the refreshed Scottish Government digital strategy, the launch of Scotland's AI strategy, and also publication of Scotland IS's report on climate tech. So it's timely for us to come together today, this morning, to discuss how we can move forward on this agenda and deliver the goals set out in our statement of ambition. I'd just like to say a few words to outline the agenda for the session, and then we can get going. So I'm delighted to say that our first presentation is an update from Philip Whitley, Policy Lead in Scottish Government's Digital Directorate. So welcome, Philip. Thank you for your time today. This will help us set the context in terms of the new digital strategy and give us an opportunity to consider how we can collectively support the ambitions set out through the work that we all do in our different organisations. Hopefully there'll be an opportunity for some quick questions after Philip's presentation, and then we'll have a couple more short presentations, one from Rushir Shah of Scottish Wildlife Trust and the other from Philippa Vigano from NatureScot. And these two presentations will highlight some of the resources and innovation tools that we've been exploring that we thought it would be helpful to share today. We'll then move into smaller breakout groups for some discussion, and those groups will be led by Francesca from NatureScot, Joe from SWT, and Gordon from Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park. And the groups will consider support and barriers for digital transformation within the sector and what we think we need to do to address those, thinking about what opportunities there are for public engagement through citizen science and making data easy to access and use. And lastly, thinking about opportunities that are particularly ripe for collaboration to help us achieve our ambitions for nature, biodiversity and tackling climate change. And hopefully there'll be a bit of time just for each group to provide a bit of feedback, and hopefully then we'll round off with a quick update from Philippa in terms of some of the further communications and engagement we have planned to try and keep this conversation going. There's obviously quite a lot to get through, so I'll do my best to keep things to time. We will be using an online Menti board just to collect the ideas in the discussion groups. So if you could have your browser open and ready to go into www.menti.com, then that will enable us to have a more interactive discussion through the breakout groups. I think that's all I wanted just to run through for just now. So without further ado, welcome Philip, and I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting the Digital Directorate to speak today. There's one other person on the call, Johnny Ruff, who has just joined us to head up our strategy and policy team. So I will let Johnny just introduce himself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Morning, everybody. So as Philip said, yeah, my name's Johnny Ruff. I've recently just joined the Scottish Government to head up the digital strategy and policy team. So I'm over on secondment from Ofcom. I work quite closely with somebody that you might know, our board member for Scotland, the chair of SEPA, Bob Downs. And I think you might have also been in a few meetings with you, Francesca, from your time at the Scotland office. So hello. Yeah, so thanks for having us along this morning. I've had a look at the NatureScot consultation. Obviously, Jane's touched on response to our consultation, sorry. Obviously, Jane's touched on some of the areas around collaboration and putting more of a focus of environment in the centre of the strategy. So really keen to hear your views and whether you think we've identified the right areas in our final version, which was obviously published on the 11th of March. So thanks once again. We're both going to be here for the full session, but I'll hand over to Philip, who's going to just take you through a few slides on the strategy. Thanks, Philip.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Apologies, there's actually quite a lot to get through in this, so it's a whistle-stop tour of the digital strategy. So if I go quite fast, if you don't pick up anything, just stop me and I can clarify any details that you might have. So last strategy was published 2017. The vision that underpins that strategy is still very much relevant. It's still all about, improving skills, equitable access to digital, providing the conditions to have a strong digital economy and reforming services, public services, so the digital public services. But the context in which we need to deliver that has changed rapidly. Coronavirus has placed digital at the front and centre of service delivery. It's no longer considered to be bolt-on or back-end IT. And to that extent, ministers did give us a very strong steer back in April 2020 to develop a new refresh strategy with big, bold, transformative actions that for a strategy that was and felt ambitious and looks and feels different from what we've done previously and is a shared vision of where Scotland is going that resonates with everyone that reads it. And it's very important to note as well that this is very much a collaborative effort with local governments in Scotland under the COSLA umbrella. COSLA have very much been our equal delivery partners in shaping the strategy and drafting the strategy and going forwards and ensuring that we deliver the actions and monitor the delivery of the actions. And it does have backing of political leaders at local government level, particularly from Councillor McGregor, who's the COSLA finance spokesman, and also at ministerial level as well. So the drafting process and the update began spring last year, as I said. Really, we began to understand where we were at that point in time and what the opportunities were for change. As I said, it was collaborative. It wasn't just people in the digital directorate doing this themselves. We involved wider Scottish Government, so we spoke to colleagues in health and social care, agriculture and rural economy like Nadia and Eddie, who are on the call today, digital planning and so on. Also the digital technologies industry in Scotland via Scotland IS. And as I said, also local government in both COSLA, local government digital office and the improvement service. The resultant discussion document that came out of that was published in September and led to a 12-week consultation process. We had significant engagement, more so than the last strategy, for that consultation process. To give you a very brief flavour of some of the organisations we did engage with, the likes of Royal Society of Edinburgh, Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, the Environment and Economy Digital Working Group, which is made up of, again, people on this call today, and the likes of SEPA and Forestry and Land Scotland and people like that. And I think in total we did reach out to something like about 180 different organisations in some form or other. That's noticeable that it resulted in a significantly high response, double what we got for the last strategy. This time I think we had something like slightly over 230 individual responses. Probably also reflects the increased awareness of digital as well. And the messages that came out of that consultation were very consistent. Firstly, and there was a lot of support for what we were trying to do. The main message probably was all about inclusion, and when I refer to inclusion in this sense, I'm talking about it in the widest sense. So it includes connectivity and skills as well. And the point was repeatedly made that it's the most essential element for the delivery of a digital Scotland. And if people do have a high-speed connectivity and the skills and the confidence to use digital technology, it will have significant benefits in the likes of public service reform, flexible working and economic growth. And all that resulted in, as Johnny said, the basis of a new strategy, which was published on the 11th of March. So this is just a short piece from the introduction to the strategy. We've included it here because it captures the main themes and drivers. As you can see, it's not just about building on new technological developments and adopting technology. It's also about the approaches and methods that we have to using that technology. So, for example, using the Scottish approach to service design to develop user-centered services. It's also about thinking about joined up services instead of developing services in a siloed way. This slide we've included just really to kind of get across that we've taken on board recommendations of the 2 Audit Scotland reports that have been published in the last few years. So in 2019, there was published a report on digital transformation in central government. Simplifying for brevity here, but the general gist of that was that there was a need for much stronger strategic leadership to drive forward collaboration across central government. And then at the beginning of this year, there was a similar report on digital transformation in local government, made very similar points about the need for clearer strategic leadership, and very much identified the publication of our national digital strategy as the driver to take this forward. So we've taken essentially the recommendations and the themes that Audit Scotland have talked about in those 2 reports and combined them into these principles, what we have that kind of permeate the whole strategy. Just included this one here, this slide, to show that every action that we have in the strategy does align to the National Performance Framework. Presumably, most people on the call here today will be familiar with the National Performance Framework. Just in case you're not, it sets out our vision for national well-being across a range of economic and social and environmental factors. Important to note that monitoring and the strategy actions, particularly around measurements and benefits, will align in some way or other to the National Performance Framework. So the strategy itself is structured into 3 parts, and this reflects the feedback that we received during the consultation. The first part is called People and Place, and this looks at the digital foundations to make sure that people can access the benefits of digital wherever they are in Scotland and from whatever background they're from. The first theme in this is No One Left Behind. And this is all about the fact that geography, background or ability should not be barriers to getting online and benefiting from digital technology. Giving you a flavour, and over the next few slides you'll see giving you a flavour of the actions. I stress that I've simplified the actions for the sake of brevity, because there's a lot more detail in the actions. So if you want to look at the full actions, you'll need to refer back to the strategy itself. Presumably some of these actions might be of interest to people on the call in the discussion today. Connectivity will have benefits to remote working, so provide better connections for staff. Also issues vacancy in the second bullet point about protecting the natural environment, inciting of mass and such forth like that. Second theme is a digital ethical nation. This is all about ensuring that the approach we take is inclusive, fair and transparent. It's about building public trust in new tech such as artificial intelligence and automation as we adopt those kind of things. It's all about building public trust and sharing non-personal data to drive innovation and public service reform. It's about enabling democracy so people can play a part wherever they live and take part in things like the participatory budget process. It's all about building on data for good as well. I've had some success there in addressing climate change, issues around child poverty and things like that. And again, presumably some of the actions that I've set out there might be of interest to the discussion today, given the climate change angle and the use of new and emerging technology too. The third theme in this People and Place setup is digital education and skills. And I think a lot of this is fairly self-evident, really. It's all about ensuring that we have the digital skills we need in every part of the workforce and at every stage of life. So it's about how we teach in primary, secondary and tertiary education. It's about upskilling the workforce and returning to the labour market. It's about improving diversity too, not just gender, but also for disabled people, people from minority ethnic backgrounds and neurodivergent people as well, because there is a body of research out there to suggest that organisations with higher levels of diversity are more productive. So in that sense, it's almost like a hard-nosed business decision, really. It's also about expanding the role of the Scottish Digital Academy. across the public sector and expanding the range of courses that they do offer to include things like cyber security, cloud computing, and service design as well. So the second part of the strategy looks at building digital into the economy. And it's important to stress that this is for all businesses, not just the digital technology sector. So it's about adapting to and seizing opportunities in an interconnected world, I suppose, where digital technology continues to disrupt markets and revolutionise industries. The first theme that we've got there is very much focusing on supports for non-digital sectors to become digitally mature businesses. It's all about things like expanding established schemes such as digital development loan and digital boost to give grants to SMEs. Second theme that we have there focuses specifically on the digital tech sector, and it's about creating and establishing the conditions to develop stronger, more resilient, more successful companies. Hopefully to get to a point where we can have more unicorns like we have in the past, such as Skyscanner and Rockstar Games. Some of the actions in that theme might be of interest, particularly the last two bullets on that slide, which are around developing sensor technology from a remote monitoring point of view, and also clearly green data centres as well. And I know climate tech has been mentioned already in the climate tech report published by Scotland IS. The third part of the strategy is all about how we will work differently in government to take advantage of digital approaches. So it's all about creating the public services that are accessible and simple to use. So the first theme we have here, public services working for us all, focuses on developing secure and resilient services based on needs of users, not the historical organisational structures of services that deliver them. So it's all about things like involving users in service design decisions. Commitments to working with key areas of governments to transform their services. We've got an action strategy that sets that out in terms of working with the likes of health and social care, learning, justice, and so on. It's also about recognising that delivering the user experience does cross traditional departmental boundaries, so we need to think about different ways of working. It's also about ensuring that services are fully accessible to everybody, clearly, of course. Also there, so you see in that second bullet point, it's about creating the conditions for innovation. So doing things like expanding CivTech, and there have been, as you'll be well aware, successful challenges in CivTech based around climate change challenges and the natural environment. It's about expanding and doing more of that. So the final theme that we have, and the second theme in this week, focus on transforming government. And this really, I suppose, you can boil down to, it's about changing the culture of organisations that deliver all these services. So it's about the cultures and working practices and embedding principles like open government to ensure greater accountability and engagement. Again, it's all about things like developing common platforms that are built once for Scotland without losing any sense of corporate identity. It's all about developing common platforms based upon common standards and data standards. It's also about using data to drive innovation, which we have seen, for example, in the pandemic, in how we've cited COVID-19 test centres, for example. So it's all about seizing those sort of opportunities as well. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of the digital strategy. If you are interested and you want more engagement with us, you can sign up to our newsletter there. You can also follow us on the Twitter account there, at NatureScot, and we do also have a blog there. So at that point, I will finish, and I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Thanks very much, Philip. That was great. You covered a lot of ground in your allotted time, so thank you very much for doing that. Really keen just to have, we've got a couple of minutes just for questions before we move on to the next couple of presentations. So if you'd like to raise your hands if you have a question. I think, Eddie, you were in there first, so can I bring you in, Eddie? Thank you.
I'm putting Philip on the spot here a bit, not with a question, but Philip, maybe just say quickly something about benefits realisation and tracking progress, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we are aware we need to do that. Without a shadow of a doubt, we are developing a benefits realisation strategy regime now. We've recruited somebody externally from the Scottish Government, which gives us a different way of working and way of looking at things. Kirsty at the moment is actually putting something together, and we're hoping to kind of put something up to ministers probably within the next maybe month or so. Probably important to note that there's probably two strands to this, that there's benefits realisation and there's also progress of strategy actions as well. I think really Mr. McKee is very keen to see how we monitor just the progress of strategy actions as well. And I can see Colin raising his hand.
Yep. Can I ask you to unshare your screen, Philip? It might be easier then just to see everybody. Thank you. That's okay. Colin, can I bring you in? Thank you.
Oh, hi. I mean, Philip made the point I was going to, but there is something else which is in terms of the way we monitor progress. For those of you who are involved leading agencies, of course, we also work through the Central Government Digital Transformation Board to try and assess the progress of digitisation across the agency landscape and the progress of digital maturity. And that survey's run twice. Hopefully we'll be running it again soon, and there's a good time series that shows the progress that we're making.
Thanks very much, Colin. That's great. Are there any other questions before we move on? Just wondering if anybody else wanted to come in. We've got another hand up there. Let me just see. Deborah, can I bring you in? Thank you.
Hi, Jane. Thank you. I just wanted to. I'm afraid I can't stay, which is a real shame because I'm really interested in this whole issue, particularly because I've come in the last couple of years from an EU Horizon 2020 funded project that was all about citizen science and gathering local data to ground truth satellite derived models. So it's completely, you know, the sort of thing that I'm really, really interested in. One thing I would like to kind of put on the table is that we should definitely be making the most of the fact that everyone's got used to remote working practice, make much, much more of that. And citizen science can operate at a massive scale because of that. And that citizen science isn't just about enabling people to access data, it's about creating data. So the more we can include communities, the more we can include more people in that, the more data we can gather and the more robust then the whole system becomes, which leads on to the key point that I really wanted to make, that it's how central open data is. I don't know if that will come up today, but I think open data is going to be absolutely vital going forward because it enables wider engagement, it builds trust where people can see how their data is being used, and it produces a massive amount of data. It creates creativity and innovation, but it also brings a huge amount of resilience to the whole system. So if open data could be brought into this discussion and the concept of open data, then I think that would be really, really helpful. I'm really sorry I can't stay because obviously I am very, very interested in this, but good luck. I look forward to seeing what comes out.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Deborah. I mean, I think certainly, Joe, your group discussion is thinking around public engagement and citizen science and making data more easily accessible and usable. So I think that certainly feels like the group where we could maybe pick up on some of those thoughts around open data and sharing. So thanks very much, Deborah. I'm sorry you can't stay longer, but that's been a really helpful contribution. Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I think at this point I'm just going to move on to our next couple of presentations. So first we'll hear from Ruff from Scottish Wildlife Trust, who's going to just share some work he's been doing to pull together some resources to support all of the groups that we have represented here today. And then we'll move on to Philippa from NatureScot, who will talk a little bit about a sort of innovation approaches that we've been exploring. So Ruff, can I hand over to you? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks again, Jane. I mean, just to say that I'm the Director of External Affairs at the Scottish Wildlife Trust, and part of my first job when I came to the Scottish Wildlife Trust just under a year and a half ago was to try and see how I might support this concept of digital transformation within and across the environment sector in Scotland. So I've been delighted to be working with NatureScot and others on that since then. When I first looked at this, I think the idea was to pull together a meeting of across the sectors, but it kind of occurred to me that it'd be really important to have resources that would inform this meeting, and resources might well come out of the meeting as well. And so having some kind of facility to capture all of the knowledge and information and opinions and ideas, particularly in the digital transformation space for the environment sector, would be really quite critical. And how would we do that in a way which, capturing what Deborah has just said, would be open and transparent and collaborative at the same time? So rather than just lots of reports and documents sitting on a shelf that gets out of date by the time it gets published, how could we make this something that's live and interactive and much more engaging? And based on previous work I did with the Sustainable Development Goals, I thought, and I had conversation with various folk about this, that a wiki approach might work. And what I'm sharing on my screen right now is a wiki. It's an open source wiki. It's not hosted on any single organization's website or anything like that. It's out there, part of a wiki farm. The idea here is that everything is Creative Commons, so anyone can go and use and engage and access this information. And the other reason why using a wiki like this kind of made a lot of sense to me is it's also something which anyone can edit, and also very accessible to particularly those who might have additional accessibility issues. It's very machine readable, for example. However, as you can see from this, there's a lot of information on here now. Lots of this digital resource knowledge bank that pulls together lots of information that's already out there that we can link into, but it's not very exciting and engaging in its current format. And so part of the thinking was, how can we make this information still stay here and be collected and open and accessible, but at the same time give it a kind of slicker way in, an easier way in, something that's a bit more engaging for someone who doesn't have a huge amount of time to read through lots of information. And so the last 2-3 months, we have put together this site, the digital transformation front end to the resources. And what this does is it takes all of the data that sits on the wiki and puts it into a much more friendly format for people to browse through. And this is why I wanted to just focus on very briefly this morning. So this is the digital transformation resource. If I just scroll down, it gives you a bit of information about it. But the mainstay is this, what we're calling the wheel, the resource wheel. And you can see from this that quite a few different resources have been categorized, primarily into 3 main topics: the scientific aspects of digital transformation, the engagement aspects, particularly engagement with the general public, and of course, what I'm calling is slicker operations, which is how we adjust and change the way our own organizations function to make them more effective and efficient. And then, of course, lots of digital support resources as well that we've come across. Project Outputs gives a sense of the kinds of things that are coming out through this digital transformation initiative itself. This event being one of them, which I can show you here, Digital Transformation Shaping. So if I click on that one, you'll see that this has the event briefing, which you all had access to before. So again, the idea here is to give a very quick and easy way to get into a resource, to hop from one resource to another. And critically, this site, everything on here is open source, so anyone can go and take not just the approach that's been taken, but the code and the design is all Creative Commons and openly available for people to reuse. And so it kind of it keeps with that kind of philosophy of taking an open approach to digital transformation. So I just thought I'd share that with you. And I'll probably just leave it there for now, if that's okay.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ruchir. Perhaps you could just share the link to that in the chat function so everybody can have a chance to explore that at their leisure. I think that'd be really helpful. I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to ask Philippa to come in now just to run through her presentation on kind of approaches to innovation. And if there's time at the end, we'll pick up a couple of questions. If not, we'll move straight out into the breakout discussions after Philippa's presentation. So if there are any questions that are coming to mind, please put them into the chat and we can try and pick them up as we go through, or we can respond to them following the event today. So without further ado, thanks very much, Ruchir, and Philippa, over to you.
Okay, can I just check, can you see the first slide of my presentation there? Is that?
Yes, we can, yes.
That's worked. Okay, good. Good start. Okay, so yeah, as Jane said, I'm going to just share with you a few of the tools and ideas that we've found useful in shaping our thinking in the Innovative Technologies programme in NatureScot. So the Innovative Technologies programme started in October 2019. It's a fairly new programme, but I think it does build on a long history of digital transformation, innovative projects, and work to understand what our data needs are. The role of the programme really is to support projects, mainstream the use of new technologies, and enable innovation within NatureScot. And yeah, I just want to share with you some of the ideas and models that we've found useful when we've been trying to do that. So this is the innovation spiral. It was developed by Nesta, the Innovation Foundation, and really it takes innovation through a life cycle from having an idea to changing the way we do things and doing things better, so getting some benefit from innovation, for example, adding value by the adoption of a new tool, streamlining a process, or being able to access new data that gives us new insights. And there are tools available to help move projects through each stage of the spiral. So I think there's a couple of really important stages on the spiral. Starting in the centre, we see opportunities and challenges. I think sometimes identifying problems can be tricky. We need to make sure we're solving the right problems and asking the right questions, but there's lots of tools that can help you do this. For example, user stories, user story mapping. We spark. I think we're probably pretty good at generating ideas, but possibly we need to move on from this stage more quickly. So be prepared to evaluate what works and progress it and drop what hasn't worked. And that's probably easier to do if the problem has been well defined to start with. We shape at the bottom there. This is where things can begin to get difficult because we need to involve more people and we need to convince them to change. And finally, we shift. So, this is the goal, that we're doing things better or we're doing new things that we've not been able to do before. And at first, when we started using this this spiral and we were considering how to move projects around, we were focused on blockers. So what were things preventing innovation and blocking projects moving through the spiral? And we actually found it quite hard to identify those blockers. And I think that's because innovation is still a new process. People found it hard to identify what was stopping innovation because they didn't really know what the journey should look like. And I guess the nature of innovation means that there's not one set of steps to go through. So instead, it became easier to think about enablers of innovation rather than blockers. And when we look at projects that we have in NatureScot, it became fairly easy to identify some of the things that had allowed or helped projects to get started. And there's maybe a starter for 10. You certainly need to have leadership that encourages innovation. So the Innovative Technologies programme in NatureScot certainly, I think, has helped to do that. And this group, I guess, as well, that shows leadership support. You do need that well-defined user need, and that requires some time to take to speak to users and understand what they need, and understanding the problem space. Sometimes I think we know that quite well, but we maybe need to communicate it to other people more successful. There has to be an opportunity to add value, so there has to be something you can do better or differently, and there has to be that space to try ideas and be honest if something hasn't worked. Skills, of course, depend on what the project is, but collaboration and partnership can be key here to accessing new skills. Collaboration, partnerships bring in new skills, new ways of looking at problems, new solutions to problems, and can also reduce the risk rather than one organisation perhaps taking something on their own. Funding, I guess, is no surprise, but the funding might not come directly to us. We might need to work with partners to harness new sources of funding. And finally, I suppose there has to be the availability of technology or data. Innovation has to be within what's possible. It has to be, the technology has to be feasible and ideally build on the skills and knowledge that are already in an organisation. So this is an example of when we've been able to see an innovative project progress through the spiral. As part of the Habitat Map of Scotland, we spoke to users of the data to try and understand what they needed to do. And we gathered lots of user stories. We did some data analysis on those, affinity mapping, grouped them together. And really what we learned was that people wanted a complete and repeatable habitat and land use map. Speaking to Tom McKenna, our economist, we were able to develop a specific use case around that for the Natural Capital Asset Index that Tom has developed. And that really gave us a really good user case study that was lined up. And when the opportunity came along to work with space intelligence and respond to the AI for Good challenge that had been set by the Can Do Innovation Fund, we were ready to go. And this collaboration allowed the project to move through the spiral. And we're now delivering and implementing the new data. We have habitat and land use maps for the whole of Scotland for 2019 and 2020, and we're already considering what the next steps are to take this innovation further. So that's been quite a nice example of, you know, when a few things have worked together. Another model or idea that has been useful has been the 3 types of innovation developed by Strategyzer. And this is a way of trying to align innovation with broader strategy aims and thinking about really what you want to achieve with innovation. So the example that Strategyzer use are for Amazon, and efficiency for them was to install robots in their warehouse to do what they already did more efficiently. And to sustain their market, they developed the Kindle, and really the transformative innovation was when they used their cloud computing resource and developed the Amazon Web Service. So how does that relate to the type of innovation we might be interested in developing? Well, Strategyzer thought about that and have developed a pioneer and maintain innovation scale for public sector organisations. And in NatureScot, we started to use this idea to think about what we wanted to achieve with innovation. So we need efficiency innovation to, for example, to deliver our data needs, more data, better data collected in the field more efficiently. And we need transformative innovation to help us tackle the crises that we face of climate change and biodiversity loss. So examples might be using tablets and image segmentation to help us be more efficient when we're doing field surveys, using artificial intelligence and Earth observation data allows us to scale up our mapping over space and time, and using that new data to perhaps create opportunity maps might make us have an impact in that transformative space in new areas, for example, like green finance, regional land use planning, or other natural capital type of applications. And I've very nearly finished. I'm keeping my eye on the time, Jane, here. So very briefly, we don't need to do this alone. There's lots of help out there. I'm sure you're familiar with some of the names and logos on this page. Scotland has 8 innovation centres, including the Data Lab and Census. There are UK catapults like the Satellite Applications Catapult that are really there to help transform the UK's capability for innovation. And there's also funding available. There's a blossoming space industry in Scotland, which means there's lots of highly skilled SMEs and plenty of expertise and knowledge at university. We've heard from Philip how the digital strategy supports the CivTech approach to transforming public services, and we've been able to take some challenges forward through CivTech. So that really does mean we don't need to be experts in all the innovative solutions, but we do need to be experts in the problems and what we need innovation to deliver. I think we have unique stories to tell, and I think people from lots of different industries are interested in our stories, and innovation and how we use innovation is part of that story. So I'll finish there. I hope I've not gone on for too long, and I'll just stop sharing my
Thanks
screen.
very much, Philippa. It's been really interesting to hear. Oh, can I ask you to mute? I'm getting a bit of feedback. Thank you. I think that's been great just to understand some of the resources that you've brought to bear in terms of the Innovative Technologies Programme at NatureScot. I'm conscious that that's been a lot of information given out to everybody, so just to keep us on track, there's maybe more opportunity in the discussion groups to actually think about some of the things that we've just heard. If there are any immediate questions, if you could just post them in the chat, that would be great. But otherwise, I think I'm just going to ask Rushir to now just get us sorted out in terms of the breakout rooms. We've got 20 minutes for discussion, and then we'll come back together just to get some quick feedback from each of the groups to see what ideas and thoughts we have in terms of potential next steps. So Rushir, can I hand over to you? Thank you.
Yeah, just to say, if everybody, you'll have seen a link I've put in the chat as well. It's also available on the briefing. This will take you to this page, which will give a rolling set of ideas that have been contributed from the breakout discussions. You can also visit the actual Menti link itself and use this code. And there's a form there where you can add your own contribution to this if you feel there's something that you've not had a chance to say and you would like to put it in for the conversation, or you'd like to prompt conversation. Just to be aware that this will be seen by all three groups. So when we do the group breakouts, all three will see the same screen. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to respond to everything on the screen, of course. But the three groups are broadly against three topics. One is focusing on, as you can see, topic 1, which is about support and barriers, topic 2, which is about public engagement and data, and topic 3, which is about collaboration and opportunities. What we've suggested is that each group starts with the main topic, which relates to their group, but do feel free to range into the other topics if that's where the group feels they would like to go as well. Group 1 is going to be facilitated by Francesca from NatureScot. Joe Pike from Scottish Wildlife Trust will facilitate Group 2, and Gordon Watson is going to facilitate topic 3. So I'm just going to go now and start the breakout groups. We've got around 20 minutes. Is that correct, Jane?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, great. And then we'll come back and do some feedback. In each group, there will be a scribe as well who will be adding content to this, where we'll be capturing the ideas, just so you're aware. But feel free to put your own ideas in as well.
I think we've got most people here, and there's been lots of information captured. Can I suggest, just in the time we have available, we just go around each of the groups for a couple of kind of key points. So I'll come to Group 1 first. Of that, I don't know, Francesca, who's your feedback person? If I can.
Yes, our feedback, Jane. Thanks very much. So just in terms of, so our question was, what support or barriers for digital transformation do we need to address? And we talked first of all in terms of support about how we could set a clear vision for digital transformation linked to environmental benefits, so that everybody could see what was in it for them and therefore buy in and commit. We felt that it was really important to be able to use examples to demonstrate where digital transformation had environmental benefits. The Habitat Map of Scotland was given as one, and really to communicate success as much as we could. We recognised that there were, particular issues around resource use. So how do we support a culture of invest to save? Which can be difficult for organisations to divert resource from delivery at the moment to think about how to improve delivery in the future using digital techniques. So again, that comes back to kind of well-defined benefits over time. And there might be particular issues for small organisations in terms of resource allocation. So how can we use some of the challenge challenge funds or different collaborative tools to support small organizations to work at scale, again thinking about the overall vision. Some examples there in terms of major national programs such as Peatland, where we could try this, and again starting, and I think there was quite a strong theme about being clear from the outset, starting with what we want to achieve and making sure that people can buy into that was thought to be really important. In terms of, we concentrated more on the sort of support rather than the barriers per se, although I've mentioned a few barriers in terms of time, resource, size of organisation. But we recognise that in terms of some other barriers linking to Deborah's question, we needed to think about how data is used, and the fact that we perhaps don't always have the sufficient lead-in times and common standards for data sharing is maybe a barrier to collaboration and therefore digital transformation for the future. And I'll leave it there. Thanks, Jane.
That's great. Thank you, Francesca. You covered a lot of ground in the 20 minutes that you had. So I think there's some really important points there that we've captured, and hopefully you'll see running through the screen the kind of summary points that have come through as well to give it a flavour, and we can share that afterwards as well. So just trying to keep us on track for time. So well, I'll pick up on any kind of questions at the end. So can I come to group 2 now? Jo, is it yourself or one of the team?
Thank you, Jane. Sam has kindly agreed to feedback on our question, which was, what are the opportunities for public engagement through citizen science and making data easy to access and use? So over to Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Jo. We had a really interesting discussion. We didn't do great on the Menti board, I'm afraid, but yeah, I've got some notes that can certainly share. So yeah, we certainly reflected that, making data accessible is certainly, a shared agenda kind of for all environmental organisations. And yeah, there's certainly a fantastic opportunity for citizen science for a number of reasons. I mean, a clear example that was first mentioned was about, collecting information on species and habitats. We've seen a lot of good examples with these app-based products that are really engaging, and particularly targeting young people through, kind of gamified apps, and that is great. And those, in combination with kind of a more shared and accessible, data, is a great opportunity for scaling up in a way which is non-organizational. So it doesn't need to be specific and kind of individually led. It can be kind of highly collaborative. And yeah, that doesn't necessarily need to target, just young people. If we can kind of make it really accessible, if we can concentrate on making tools that are highly engaging and intuitive to use, then it can be a really intergenerational thing. It takes an intergenerational approach that really gets people hooked in. And yeah, at the citizen science level, if we do create those engaging tools and think about them in a clever way, then we can realize a huge resource which is incredibly useful, alongside getting people to engage with the topic, which is really, really important. But yeah, of course, it goes beyond the individual, and we talked about how accessible data through citizen science is going to be helpful for communities, planners, and also in consultation aspects too. So yeah, there's definitely a huge task to do in terms of thinking about how we gather and service that data, and obviously a clear purpose will help us to align our priorities within that. But if we can kind of weave all that together, then there are huge opportunities for scaling this up, and with accessibility being a priority, as we heard about in the digital strategy.
Thanks, Sam. Great summary. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think that you picked up on certainly some points that came up in group 3 as well, around that kind of the gathering and servicing of data. So thanks, Sam. I'll move on. Gordon, can I come to you now for group 3? Thank you.
Sure. I think we're in danger of this becoming a bit repetitive, because certainly we focused our discussion on data capture and data standards as well. Obviously looking at things that are going on just now, like regional land use partnership pilots, other stuff that's happening in terms of data capture. People are surveying peatlands all over the place right now, and the issue of that being collected to a common standard and being made accessible, you know, not just across organisations but to the customer. Obviously, landowners that we're working with to encourage land use change and habitat restoration. How do we make sure the data is available to be used for decision making as well? I think, you know, the point was made that it's not just about existing data, but actually what are we missing, and there's, you know, a need for a gap analysis. How can we facilitate common data capture standards, and obviously thinking of citizen science in that, is there some technology around capture as well as a common data standards that we work to. We touched on who should do this. Is it the role of government to actually host all of this, or is it more as an enabler, particularly given the discussion earlier about the need for accessible platforms, the Wiki approach that Ruff mentioned earlier. So yeah, I think that was certainly felt with the work ahead, that there's really need to really tackle this quite quickly, but in a way that's accessible to not just government and NGO organisations, but to, you know, everyone with an interest in these topics. We touched before the cut-off. We touched briefly on the cyber threat as well, and I suppose that again relates to where things are held, and the question of, is it better to have data and services held centrally in a robust way, or is it actually better to have them more disaggregated so that the data threat is dispersed as well? So that was something we only just started the conversation on. But yeah, a very strong message from our group on data.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Gordon. So I think there's obviously a huge amount of ground being covered there, and a key theme around data from all of the different perspectives, from organisational and citizen science. So I see, Susan, you've posted up as well in terms of thinking about things from the sort of user front end perspective as well. So, you know, thank you for sharing that. I think that's given us probably a clear agenda around data to think about how we move forward in terms of this conversation. So I just think we've got a couple of minutes, so I was just going to, unless there are any questions that anybody wanted to come in with, I was just going to ask Philippa to say a few words just in terms of some of the thoughts we've had around maintaining the conversation and thinking about how we can maintain momentum on sort of the kind of communications and engagement side of things, and plan for sort of follow-on events. So if that's okay with everybody, I'll ask Philippa just to come in for a couple of minutes, and then hopefully we can close on time in a couple of minutes. Thank you. Philippa.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. So I've just put a slide up. We have some planned communication. So this is really building on what Ruff shared with us before on the resource page. We've got a plan of blogs and workshops to share ideas on projects that are going on, discussions around collaboration and funding, sharing innovation ideas. So we thought it would be interesting to bring organisations like CivTech and maybe Scottish Enterprise and the Data Lab into some of the discussions, so we can see what resources they have to offer as well, and any other resources, you know, that you may feel are useful for digital transformation. But we're very conscious that the communication we have planned at the moment is very you know, us focused. It's lots of projects that we're carrying out, but obviously there's lots more going on out there. So it's really a plea to everybody to say, you know, what's missing, share your ideas. If you've any projects that you'd like to include in the resource page, then please do get in touch, and we can discuss how best to do that. As Ruff said, the wiki is completely open source. but we can certainly help you add any projects or blogs or ideas and whatever you think might be missing to that resource wheel to make it the most use for everyone. So I think really that was all I wanted to say. If you've got any ideas for other things we can include, then just please do get in touch. We're hoping to keep up the momentum of this group a little bit more, so sort of fairly regular emails that maybe will give an update to people about what's happened, what's been added to the resource wheel, and also news and invitations to additional workshops and talks. So hopefully that will be of interest to everyone. I don't know, Rashir, if you've got anything else you want to add just on that.
Yeah, I mean, just to say that, I mean, you know, in addition to this regular flow of case studies and blogs, which will help flesh out some of the topics that you've given us a very strong steer on this morning, we're also planning to widen up the conversation a bit more by bringing in those people that are actively leading on digital transformation for your organizations and other organizations in the environment sector. You know, the kind of digital leads, the people that are involved in digital infrastructure and so on, in a conference, or should I say unconference, because that's the kind of thing digital people do. And we've been having conversations with both myself and Philip and others in NatureScot, been having conversations with Nadia and Eddie and others at Scottish Government about how we might work together on hosting this kind of workshop, interactive workshop that brings together not just the senior leaders, but also those that are actually on the ground doing this stuff, having taken a cue from the kind of topics that are coming out today. So I think that will help, will broaden the conversation, will bring more content, and it'll allow us to continue the momentum. And the plan is to kind of look at something like that to later in this year.
Okay, thanks, Philippa, and thanks, Rashir. I think, Nadia, did you want to come in quickly? And then I think that's just about out of time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. The only other thing maybe just worth noting in the background is obviously very early thinking about an opportunity on COP26. So that might be something colleagues across this call want to give some thought to. And lucky for us, we're sort of engaging with Philip and his team on it. So maybe just another area to gather some ideas and momentum on. And then maybe again, Philip, we can pick up with your wider team on that. So that was all. Thanks, Jane.
That's great, thanks, Nadia. So I think that's us just about out of time. So I'd really like to thank all of the presenters today and the facilitators of the groups, to Rashir for looking after us from a technical point of view, and also a big thank you to all of you for giving up your time and for your active participation in the conversation. We will get a short feedback out to you just to get a sense of whether we've hit the mark and any other areas that you're particularly keen to explore, and look forward to getting together with you again soon so that we can continue the conversation. So thanks very much indeed, everyone. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.